The gunshot that shattered the lighthouse lens came from inside the tower. Zahara Whitmore pressed her back against the cold stone wall of the keeper's quarters, her breath forming clouds in the frigid Pacific air as she listened to the footsteps circling above her. The coastal town of Perdition's gate clung to the Oregon cliffs like a desperate prayer, and tonight that prayer had gone unanswered. The lighthouse, the only thing standing, between ships and the rocks that had devoured 17 vessels in the past decade, had gone dark for the first time in 30 years. And someone had made damn sure it would stay that way. Her father's blood was still warm on her hands. "Come out." "Zahara," a voice called from the spiral staircase, smooth as creek water over stones. "Your father made this harder than it needed to be. Don't make the same mistake." She recognized that voice. Sani Blackwood, the half-Chinook railroad surveyor who'd arrived in Perdition's gate 3 months ago with his transit equipment, his quiet intensity, and eyes the color of smoke over water. He'd taken his meals at her father's table. He'd helped her repair the keeper's cottage roof when the winter storms had torn it to pieces. He'd stood so close to her on the gallery walk that she'd felt the heat of him through her wool coat, both of them pretending to study the horizon while studying each other instead, and now he'd put a bullet through her father's chest. Zahara's fingers found the cold metal of her father's Navy Colt revolver, where it had fallen beside his writing desk. Blood soaked into the shipping manifests he'd been studying when Sani had climbed through the window. Manifests that had nothing to do with ships or cargo, but everything to do with the railroad men who'd been surveying the coastline, measuring distances, calculating costs, deciding which towns would live and which would be erased from the map like pencil marks on paper. "I know you're in the keeper's room," Sani continued, his boots making the iron stairs sing. "I can hear your breathing. That's good, it means you're alive, and I'd prefer to keep you that way. The foghorn should have sounded 20 minutes ago. By now, the Northern Star would be approaching the rocks, her captain trusting that the lighthouse beam would guide her safely into harbor. 300 tons of timber and 47 souls, including the mayor's wife and children, returning from San Francisco. Without the light, without the horn, they'd crash into the devil's teeth, the jagged rocks that rose from the surf like tombstones, marking the graveyard of ships. Zahara had spent 30 years in this lighthouse. She'd learned to trim wicks before she could read, had memorized the rhythm of the lens rotation like a heartbeat, had stood watch with her father through storms that made the tower sway like a drunk man. She knew every stone, every crack, every shadow, and she knew that the fuel reservoir still held 3 hours of oil. She burst from the keeper's room and ran not up toward the lamp room, but down the main stairs toward the base of the tower, her boots hammering against stone as Sani's shout of surprise echoed above her. The tower's entrance stood open to the night, and beyond it, the town of Perdition's gate spread across the headlands like scattered dice, its windows glowing warm against the darkness. But Zahara didn't run for town. She ran for the cliff edge. The wooden crane stood where her father had built it, extending out over the abyss, a loading mechanism for hauling supplies up from boats when the sea was too rough for the harbor. The rope still hung there, swaying in the wind, descending 200 feet to the rocks and foam below. Zahara grabbed the rope, wrapped it once around her waist, and stepped backward into empty air. She dropped fast, the rope burning through her gloves as she controlled her descent. The lighthouse tower rising above her like a white finger pointing at the stars. Above, she heard Sani reach the entrance, heard his curse as he spotted her. But he didn't shoot, couldn't shoot, not if he wanted her alive. And something in his voice had told her he did. The question was why did her boots hit the rocks, 30 feet above the tide line, where her father's emergency skiff was tied. The boat was old, patched with tar and prayers, but it would float. She cut the rope with her belt knife and pushed off into the surf just as Sani appeared at the cliff edge above, silhouetted against the dark sky. "Zahara, wait!" His voice barely carried over the crash of waves. "You don't understand what's happening. Your father—" She didn't wait to hear the rest. She pulled on the oars, fighting the current, angling toward the southern rocks where she could beach the skiff and climb the hidden path back to the lighthouse from behind. The fog was rolling in thick now, cold and wet as a shroud, and somewhere in that fog, the northern star was sailing blind toward her doom. Zahara's arms burned as she rowed, her father's blood still sticky on her palms, making the oar handles slick. In her coat pocket, the Colt pressed heavy against her ribs, loaded with 5 rounds. 5 chances to set things. Right. 5 chances to find out why the man she'd almost let herself love had murdered her father and condemned 47 people to death in the dark. The lighthouse beam should have been visible for 20 miles. Tonight, its absence was a hole in the world, and Zahara was rowing straight into that darkness, with a killer behind her and Shipwreck ahead, and no idea which would claim her first. The hidden path up the southern cliff face had been carved by smugglers 50 years before Zahara was born, back when Perdition's Gate was nothing but a way station for whiskey runners and men fleeing California justice. Her father had shown her the route when she was 12, making her climb it blindfolded until she could navigate by touch alone. "The lighthouse keeper protects more than ships," he'd told her, his weathered hands guiding hers to each handhold. "Sometimes you protect secrets. Sometimes you protect yourself." Tonight, she was protecting both. Zahara pulled herself over the final ledge onto the grassy headland behind the lighthouse complex, her lungs screaming, her arms trembling with exhaustion. The keeper's cottage sat dark and silent, but light blazed from the storage shed, not the golden glow of lamplight, but the sharp white flare of a phosphorus lantern, the kind railroad surveyors used for night work. She crept closer, the Colt heavy in her hand, and peered through the gap in the weathered boards. 3 men stood inside, and none of them was Sani. The first she recognized immediately, Thomas Greer, president of the Pacific Northwestern Railroad, his silver hair and expensive suit out of place among the fishing nets and lamp oil. The second was younger, wearing a deputy's badge that caught the lantern light, Marshall Webb's new hire from Portland, name of Cutler. The third man she'd never seen before, but his hands bore the calluses of a sailor, and a tattoo of an anchor marked his forearm. "Blackwood's taking too long." Greer's voice was sharp with impatience. "The ship should have hit the rocks 10 minutes ago." "Maybe the woman lit the lamp again," Cutler suggested, his hand resting on his gun belt. "Impossible." Blackwood disabled the mechanism. The sailor moved to the window, scanning the darkness. "Without the counterweights, that lens won't turn even if someone manages to light it." And the woman's dead. Blackwood confirmed it. Zahara's breath caught. Sani had told them she was dead. Why would he lie? "The Northern Star has to sink tonight," Greer continued, pulling a sheaf of papers from his coat. "The insurance investigation will take 6 months minimum. By then, the railroad will own every inch of coastline from here to Cape Disappointment. The town council will have no choice but to sell no lighthouse, no harbor traffic, no reason for Perdition's Gate to exist." Understanding crashed over Zahara like a rogue wave. The railroad didn't want to build through Perdition's Gate, they wanted to erase it. The town sat on the only deep-water harbor between Astoria and San Francisco. That didn't require blasting through mountains. Prime real estate for a rail terminus and shipping port, except the town was protected by federal charter as long as the lighthouse operated. Sink a ship. Blame the lighthouse keeper's negligence. Shut down the light. Buy the land for pennies. Her father had discovered the plan, and Sani had killed him for it. Rage and grief twisted in her chest like a knife, but she forced them down. 47 people were sailing toward death, and she had maybe 10 minutes to stop it. The lamp mechanism was disabled, but there were other ways to make light. She backed away from the shed and ran low across the grass toward the lighthouse entrance. The door stood open just as she'd left it when she'd fled down the cliff. She slipped inside and began climbing the spiral stairs, her boots silent on the iron steps. Halfway up, she heard breathing above her. Zahara froze, the Colt raised, her heart hammering against her ribs. A shadow detached from the darkness of the lamp room entrance, descending toward her, and she nearly fired before recognition stopped her finger on the trigger. Sani stood 3 steps above her, his hands raised, empty of weapons. Blood stained his shirt, her father's blood, and his face was haggard in the dim light filtering up from below. "Don't shoot," he whispered. "Please, Zahara. Let me explain. You killed my father." Her voice shook, but the gun didn't waver. "You disabled the lighthouse. You're going to let those people die." "No." He descended 1 step slowly. "I'm trying to save them. Your father isn't dead, Zahara. I shot him, yes, but not to kill him. The bullet went through his shoulder, missed the lung. He's alive, hidden in the tide caves below the southern cliffs. I had to make Greer believe he was dead." Liar! But doubt crept into her voice. She'd seen blood, seen her father fall, but in the chaos, in her panic, had she actually checked for a pulse? "Your father discovered Greer's plan 3 weeks ago," Sani continued, his words tumbling out fast and desperate. "He asked me to help, told me he'd contacted the federal marshal in Portland, but needed time to gather evidence. I've been playing along, pretending to work for Greer, feeding him information while your father collected shipping records, bribery payments, everything. Tonight was supposed to be the handoff. I'd get the evidence to the marshal's courier on the Northern Star, but Greer moved up the timeline. He ordered me to kill your father and disable the light tonight before the ship arrived. So you did exactly that." Zahara's finger tightened on the trigger. "I made Greer think I did. But Zahara, the counterweights aren't disabled. I sabotaged the sabotage. The mechanism will work if someone knows which gears to bypass. Your father taught me the backup system last week in case something went wrong." Below them, the shed door banged open. Voices carried across the compound, Greer's voice, sharp with command. "Find her. Find them both. And make sure that light stays dark." Sani's eyes locked with Zahara's, smoke gray and desperate. "You can shoot me or you can trust me. But decide now, because in 8 minutes, the Northern Star hits the Devil's Teeth and everyone aboard dies. Including the marshal's courier, the only person who can bring Greer down." Zahara lowered the gun, not because she trusted Sani. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford with her father's blood still wet on his hands, but because 47 lives hung in the balance, and if there was even a chance he was telling the truth, she had to take it. "Show me the mechanism," she said. "But if you're lying, I'll put the next bullet somewhere that matters." They climbed together in tense silence, their footsteps masked by the wind howling through the tower's arrow-slit windows. The lamp room spread before them like a crystal cathedral, the massive Fresnel lens dominating the circular space, its 1,000 prismatic panels dark and useless. The lens floated in a mercury bath, designed to rotate with minimal friction, casting its beam across 20 miles of ocean when it worked. Sani moved to the clockwork mechanism, his hands steady despite the gun Zahara kept trained on his spine. Greer's man cut 3 chains in the counterweight system. The lens can't rotate without them. He pointed to the severed links hanging loose. But your father built a backup, a manual crank system hidden in the floor. It's slower, less efficient, but it'll turn the lens. He knelt and pried up a section of floorboard, revealing a hand crank assembly that looked like it belonged on a ship's anchor windlass. The metal gleamed with fresh oil, her father's work, maintained and ready. "You'll need to crank continuously," Sani explained, already lighting the lamp's wick with practiced efficiency. The flame caught, grew, and suddenly the lamp room blazed with light that reflected and multiplied through the lens panels. "I'll handle the crank. You watch the sea." "No." Zahara grabbed his arm, yanking him back. "You're not touching anything. I'll work the crank. You watch for the ship and for Greer's men. Below, boots hammered on the iron stairs. Multiple sets, coming fast." Sani pulled a revolver from his belt and pressed it into her hand, a Remington, newer than her father's Colt. "Your father's gun only has 5 rounds. This one's fully loaded. You'll need them both." Their eyes met, and in that moment, Zahara saw something in his face that made her breath catch. Not just desperation, but a raw, aching emotion that looked dangerously close to the feelings she'd been harboring for 3 months. The almost touches, the lingering glances, the way he'd found excuses to stand close to her on the gallery walk, none of it had been pretense, which somehow made the betrayal cut deeper. "If my father is dead," she said quietly, "I will hunt you to the ends of the earth. He's alive. I swear it on everything I am." Sani moved to the seaward window, scanning the fog. "But we need to survive the next 10 minutes first." Zahara holstered both guns and grabbed the crank handle. The mechanism resisted at first, then began to turn with a grinding shriek of metal on metal. The massive lens shuddered, rotated an inch, stopped. She cranked harder, feeling the burn in her shoulders, her arms, her back. The lens turned again, and suddenly the light beamed out across the water, a brilliant shaft cutting through the fog like a sword through silk. "There," Sani pointed, 2 points off the port bow. "That's the Northern Star." Zahara saw it, a dark shape in the fog, sails billowing, moving fast toward the jagged rocks that rose like teeth from the surf. The ship was less than a quarter-mile from the Devil's Teeth, maybe 3 minutes from impact at her current speed. "They're not turning." Zahara cranked faster, sweat streaming down her face despite the cold. "They don't see us." "Keep cranking. The light needs to rotate. They'll see the beam sweep past." The door to the lamp room exploded inward. Cutler came through first, gun drawn, his deputy's badge glinting in the lamplight. Behind him, the sailor from the shed, carrying a rifle. They'd left Greer behind, too valuable to risk in the violence to come. "Step away from the mechanism," Cutler ordered. "Both of you. Now." Zahara kept cranking. The lens rotated another foot, the beam sweeping past the ship. On the Northern Star's deck, she saw a figure point toward the light. They'd spotted it. Cutler fired. The bullet sparked off the metal housing 6 inches from Zahara's head. She flinched but didn't stop cranking. Another rotation. The ship was turning now, slowly, her captain fighting to change course. Sani moved like water. One moment he stood at the window, the next he'd closed the distance to Cutler, his hand locking around the deputy's wrist, forcing the gun toward the ceiling. They grappled, crashing into the lens housing. The sailor raised his rifle, but couldn't get a clean shot with the 2 men struggling. Zahara cranked. Another rotation. The Northern Star was heeling hard to starboard, but the rocks loomed close, so close, the sailor pointed his rifle at Zahara instead. "Stop cranking or die, lady." She kept cranking. The rifle boomed in the enclosed space, deafening. The bullet punched through the floor 6 inches from the crank mechanism, and Zahara understood he was aiming to disable the device, not kill her. Not yet. Greer still needed the lighthouse keeper's death to look like an accident. A tragedy, not murder. That gave her an edge. She released the crank and drew both revolvers in a single fluid motion, her father's Colt in her left hand, Sani's Remington in her right. The sailor's eyes widened as he realized his mistake, tried to swing the rifle toward her, but she was already firing. The Colt bucked in her hand. The sailor dropped. Behind her, Sani slammed Cutler's head against the iron stairway railing. The deputy crumpled out and out on the water. The Northern Star cleared the Devil's Teeth by 20 yards, her sails catching the wind, carrying her safely toward the harbor. Zahara grabbed the crank and kept rotating the lens, kept the light burning, while below in the compound, Thomas Greer started screaming orders she couldn't hear and didn't care about. "Your father," Sani gasped, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. "We need to get to him before Greer figures out he's still alive." Zahara looked at the man who'd saved 47 lives, who'd risked everything to help her father, who'd somehow become essential to her survival in the span of 10 brutal minutes. "Then we'd better move fast," she said, "because when Greer realizes we've won, he'll burn this whole town down rather than face justice." The tide caves beneath the southern cliffs were flooding. Zahara could hear the ocean rushing through the caverns as she and Sani descended the smuggler's path, their lantern casting wild shadows across the rock face. High tide was in 20 minutes if her father was injured. Trapped in those caves, he'd drown before they could reach him, if he was even alive. "The third cave," Sani shouted over the roar of the surf. "That's where I left him. There's a shelf above the high water mark." They hit the beach at a run, seawater soaking their boots as waves crashed against the rocks. The cave mouths gaped like wounds in the cliff face, 3 black openings that exhaled the salt smell of deep ocean. Zahara chose the rightmost entrance and plunged inside, the lantern held high. "Papa!" Her voice echoed off stone walls slick with algae. "Papa, answer me!" For 3 heartbeats, nothing. Then, weak but unmistakable, "Zahara?" She found him on a narrow ledge 15 feet above the cave floor, his shirt soaked with blood, his face gray with pain and blood loss. But his eyes were clear, alert, and blazing with the same fierce determination that had kept the lighthouse burning for 30 years. "Took you long enough," her father rasped, managing a ghost of his familiar smile. "Did the ship make it?" "The Northern Star is safe." Zahara scrambled up the rocks, Sani close behind her. "Every soul aboard. The evidence?" Sani reached into his coat and pulled out an oilskin package, pristine and dry. "Everything you collected. Greer's bribery payments, the forged documents, the shipping manifest showing how he's been buying up coastal property through shell companies. The federal marshal's courier is on that ship. We get this to him, and Greer's finished." Zahara's father gripped Sani's arm with surprising strength. "You're a good man, Blackwood. Better than I had any right to hope for when I recruited you." He turned to his daughter, and his expression softened. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you. Couldn't risk it. If Greer suspected you knew anything, you let me think you were dead." Zahara's voice broke. "I've been carrying your blood on my hands for an hour. Better my blood than yours." He tried to sit up, gasped in pain. "We need to move. Greer won't give up just because one ship survived. He'll try to finish what he started." As if summoned by those words, the sound of horses reached them, multiple riders, moving fast along the clifftop road. Through the cave mouth, Zahara saw torches blazing against the night sky. A dozen men, maybe more, converging on the lighthouse. "He's going to burn it," she breathed. "He's going to destroy the lighthouse and blame it on us." "Not just the lighthouse." Her father struggled to his feet, supported by Sani. "He'll burn the whole compound. Destroy all the records, claim we were part of some criminal conspiracy. Without evidence, without witnesses, it's our word against a railroad baron's." The water surged around their ankles, rising fast. They had minutes before the cave became a death trap. "Can you ride?" Sani asked Zahara's father, "Can I breathe?" "Then I can ride." The old keeper's jaw set with stubborn pride. "There's a horse Maimar in the stable behind the cottage. If it's still there." They made it out of the cave just as the tide roared in, claiming the space where they'd stood. The beach had vanished beneath the surf, forcing them to climb the path with water lapping at their heels. Zahara went first, her father between her and Sani. All three of them moving with desperate speed. They crested the cliff to find chaos. Flames were already licking up the walls of the keeper's cottage, orange and hungry against the night. Men with torches surrounded the lighthouse, but they hadn't set it alight yet. The stone tower wouldn't burn easily, and Greer was nowhere to be seen. "He's in the lamp room," Zahara realized. "He's going to destroy the lens. Without it, the lighthouse is worthless, and the federal government will abandon the station." Sani pressed the oilskin package into her hands. "Get your father to the harbor. The Northern Star will be docking in 10 minutes. Find the marshal's courier. His name is Hayes, gray beard, wears a federal star under his coat. Give him the evidence." "What are you going to do?" He smiled, and it was the same smile he'd given her that day on the gallery walk, when they'd stood so close she could feel his heartbeat. "I'm going to have a conversation with Mr. Greer about the wages of greed." Before she could protest, he kissed her quick and fierce and desperate. A promise and an apology wrapped in one breathless moment. Then he was gone, running toward the lighthouse, disappearing into the smoke and chaos. Zahara wanted to follow, wanted to fight beside him. But her father's weight against her shoulder reminded her of what mattered most. She half carried him toward the stable, found the Mare still there, terrified but alive. She hauled her father into the saddle, climbed up behind him, and kicked the horse toward the harbor road. Behind them, a gunshot echoed from the lighthouse tower, then another, then silence. The harbor was ablaze with activity. When they arrived, the Northern Star had docked, and sailors were flooding the waterfront, spreading word of their near disaster. Zahara found Hayes within minutes, pressed the oilskin package into his hands, and watched his expression shift from confusion to grim satisfaction as he examined the contents. "This is enough to hang Greer 10 times over," the marshal said. "Where is he now?" "The lighthouse." Zahara was already turning the horse. "And so is someone I need to get back." She rode like fury itself, her father's shouted protests fading behind her as she galloped back up the coastal road. The lighthouse still stood, its beam still turning. Sani must have repaired the mechanism. The keeper's cottage was ash and embers, but the tower endured. She found them on the gallery walk, Sani and Thomas Greer, silhouetted against the rotating light. Greer's expensive suit was torn, his silver hair wild, and Sani's gun was pointed at the railroad baron's chest. "It's over, Greer," Sani was saying as Zahara climbed the final stairs. "The evidence is with the federal marshal. Your men are scattering. You've lost." Greer laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "I've lost? Boy, I own half the judges in Oregon. I'll be out of custody in a week." "Maybe," Zahara said, stepping onto the gallery. "But you'll never touch this lighthouse. You'll never touch this town. And everyone will know what you tried to do tonight." Something shifted in Greer's expression, desperation replacing arrogance. His hand moved toward his coat. Sani fired. The bullet took Greer in the shoulder, spinning him backward against the railing. He teetered there for a moment, and Zahara saw the calculation in his eyes, saw him decide that death was preferable to disgrace. He let himself fall. Zahara lunged forward, but Sani caught her, held her back as Greer plummeted into the darkness. The ocean claimed him with barely a splash, and the lighthouse beam swept on, indifferent and eternal. 3 months later, Zahara stood on the gallery walk with Sani. watching the autumn sun paint the Pacific in shades of gold and crimson. Her father was inside, recovered and irascible, arguing with the federal inspector about proper lamp maintenance procedures. "The railroad's pulling out," Sani said quietly, "building their terminus in Astoria instead. Perdition's gate gets to stay exactly as it is." "Is that what you want?" Zahara asked. "To stay?" He turned to her, smoke-gray eyes reflecting the dying light. "I want whatever future has you in it. Whether that's here, keeping the light burning, or somewhere else entirely." She took his hand, felt the calluses from cranking the lens mechanism, from building and repairing and fighting to save what mattered. "Then I guess you're staying," she said, "because this lighthouse has been in my family for 3 generations, and I'll be damned if I'm the one who walks away." His smile was sunrise and homecoming wrapped together. "Yes, ma'am." The lighthouse beam began its rotation, sweeping across the water, guiding ships safely home. And for the first time since that terrible night when the light went dark, Zahara felt something unclenching in her chest, not quite peace. Not yet, but the promise of it. The ocean kept its secrets. The lighthouse kept its vigil, and 2 people who'd found each other in darkness kept the light burning, together against whatever storms might come.